My name is Mary Rios. I am the Senior Advocate Specialist with Disability Rights California. I turned on my camera to say hello to everybody. Good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm going to turn off my camera only because I don't want it. I have an unstable internet. I don't want it to affect the presentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And as Raymond indicated, today's topic is on mental health and special education. What we'll be discussing today is basically a roadmap. I want to give a brief roadmap on special education, disability-related behaviors and mental health issues, possible consequences that students may face. We're going to talk briefly about the School Attendance Review Board, which is also known as SARB, inappropriate discipline tactics that the school district may use, school staff may use, suspensions, manifestation determinations, educationally related mental health services, the functional behavior assessment, and then also we're going to talk about the positive behavior intervention plans. A brief disclaimer, the following presentation is meant for education only and does not constitute legal advice nor counsel. Everyone's situation may be unique and require careful attention. Keep in mind that the information these slides contain could become out of date or outdated as the laws and local practices relating to these matters are constantly developing. So here we have a special education roadmap. So when either a parent or a doctor suspects that a child may qualify for special education, what we basically advise is that you write a letter to the school district requesting a comprehensive psychoeducational evaluation. If you suspect that your child or the student may have other difficulties, for example, with occupational therapy, speech therapy, you can request additional assessments as well. So what happens when you request the school district complete an assessment? The school must provide an assessment plan within 15 days of receiving your request. Once you consent to the assessment plan, the school district then has 60 days to complete the assessments and hold an IEP meeting. What happens within those 60 days is the initial IEP meeting, and this is to determine whether the student qualifies for special education. We also recommend, one quick tip is that you can also ask the Section 504 coordinator to be present, and you want them there because there's a possibility that the child may not qualify for special education, but could qualify for a 504 plan. So once the initial IEP meeting takes place, the child qualifies for special education, an IEP meeting is developed. Also, what we advise is when you request the assessments, you want to include on that assessment plan, once you receive it, for the school district to provide you copies of the assessment reports at least 5 days before the initial IEP meeting. Why do you want to do that? You want to do that because you want to have an opportunity to review the assessments prior to the initial IEP meeting. It's always good to look at the reports. There have been situations where parents do not agree with the assessments. Parents then have a right to request an independent educational evaluation. The school district has two options. They either approve the independent evaluation or they have to file for due process and show that their assessment was an appropriate assessment. So they review the IEP. the other thing is that once they establish the child qualifies for special education, they have a yearly IEP. However, keep in mind that parents or the school district can request to have an IEP meeting at any time. When the parent requests an IEP, the school district has to hold an IEP meeting within 30 days. If you feel that something needs to be changed at in the IEP, if you want to change a goal, if you want to request a new service, again, keep in mind that you can request an IEP meeting at any time. When your child turns 16, there is a transition plan meeting that takes place. When you have the initial IEP meeting, you have the right to record your meeting as long as you give the school district 24-hour written notice that you plan to record the IEP meeting. Keep in mind that you can only do the audio recording unless everybody at the meeting gives their approval to. Sometimes it's a Zoom meeting, and they may refuse to have their cameras on. So just letting everybody know that you do have to provide written notice. You have the right to disagree with the IEP if the services and supports that they're offering or the placement, if you feel that the placement is not an appropriate placement. Your child has a right to a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, meaning they have to look at general education first, and then if the child cannot be placed in a general ed setting, they have to look at alternative placements such as special day class. Every 3 years, the school district also does what's called a reevaluation or a reassessment, and they do this to see where the student is academically, if they're receiving related services such as speech therapy or occupational therapy. They also evaluate in those areas to determine whether the student still continues to need the service or if they do not need the service. They also determine whether the student still qualifies for special education. Many times the student has met all their goals, and the school district will hold an exit IEP meeting. If you disagree with that, again, you have the right not to sign the IEP if you don't agree to the IEP. So what are some of the disability-related behaviors that a student may have? Some common disability-related behaviors may be disrupting the class. These are things to look out for, especially if your child is not in special education yet. Oops, sorry about that. Screaming, they may shut down, threatening other students, being disrespectful, rough play. Many times the student elopes or they run out of class, they fight, and it could be verbally and or physically, inattention where they don't pay attention in class. So these are some common behaviors that students may exhibit. And these are some of the common consequences. Citations, write-ups. Many times school districts will try to suspend the student because of the behaviors. We have also heard where, they're marked as truant, or if they miss a lot of school, they're referred to the school attendance review board. The child may refuse to go to school, or parents will get constant calls at home for you to pick up the child because of the behaviors that they're having at school. When the school districts call, or when the school calls a parent to pick up the child, they shouldn't, well, first of all, they shouldn't be calling you. The only reason they should call you is if the student is being suspended. They shouldn't send them home just to send them home because of the behaviors. Many times students with that do exhibit behaviors, depending on what the issues are, many times they'll face expulsion or they're sent to the office. And what happens? Missed educational opportunity. And that, these are some common consequences. Many students either don't go to school, they're late, and this basically is a tell that that something is going on, and the school district should assess a student when they either suspect that they may qualify for special education, or if the parent writes a letter requesting that the school district assess the student. So what is the Student Attendance Review Board? It's also known as the SARB. They basically, it was developed to identify why a child is not attending school. They're there to assist to try to get the child to attend school, to prevent the student from falling through the cracks. Under California Education Code, Section 48200, it requires all students ages 6 to 18 to attend school full time. So they're supposed to receive their education up until they're 18 years old or until they graduate. Some of the inappropriate discipline tactics that happen, that do happen when children exhibit some behaviors are they either provide no recess or they punish them. They ask them to sit in back of the classroom. They send the student to the office, or many times they'll tell them that they cannot attend a field trip. You can't participate in events or activities, or no computer time. Sometimes, many times, they get sent home early, and on some occasions, restraint or seclusion. These tactics are not okay. Some of these tactics can also be looked at discriminatory, because the student has a disability. So these are inappropriate discipline tactics that shouldn't be taking place at school. And what happens then, many times when they're referred to the school attendance review board, and due to inappropriate discipline tactics, what school districts may try to do is push the student out of the school, by expelling them, by referring them to the SARB, and it's illegal. Early dismissal should only be caused by sickness or suspension. Early dismissal should be considered a suspension each time it happens. And what we basically advise parents is, if the school calls you to pick up your child, tell them to give you something in writing. Tell them to give you a suspension notice and the reason why they're being sent home. Students have a right to attend their local comprehensive school unless formally expelled. Parents cannot be forced to sit at school with their child, just to deal with their behavior. And the school district should be assessing the child and ensuring that the student receives the appropriate supports and services that are needed, for them to receive their education. Suspensions, always request notice of suspension. The student has a right to a manifestation determination meeting. The student can only be suspended 10 days out of the school year. And if that happens, what happens is that triggers a manifestation determination to determine whether the incident or the reason that they're being suspended was a manifestation of their disability. And we'll talk about it in a few more slides. Suspensions cannot be counted as truancies. Students under a 504 plan have the same rights in suspension procedures. Your child can only be denied to return to school without procedures if there was a weapon involved, in the incident, drugs involved, or there was a severe injury to, or they caused bodily harm. Also, transportation, suspension from school bus. If the student is suspended from utilizing the school bus or transportation, the district must provide an alternative form of transportation at no cost to the parent until the child is allowed to go back and use the transportation. That could be an Uber, that could be a taxi, depending on what the student needs. The school district does have to look at alternative transportation. So here we have the information on the manifestation determination review. A student with an IEP or a 504 plan engages in behavior. 2, the school gives the student a suspension for the behavior. 3, school recommends expulsion or reaches the 10th day of suspension. 5, what are my options if I disagree with the outcome of the manifestation determination review? 4, sorry about that. 4, let me tell you what the and I've covered the manifestation determination review. An MDR is an IEP team meeting where the team figures out whether the student's behavior is a manifestation of their disability. A school must hold a manifestation determination if it recommends a student with a disability for expulsion or suspends the student for more than 10 days in a school year for a pattern of behavior. The IEP team, when they hold the manifestation determination, must answer these 2 questions. 1, was the behavior caused by the student's disability? And 2, was the behavior caused by the school's failure to implement the IEP or the 504? If the IEP team answers yes to either of these questions, the student's behavior is a manifestation of their disability and the school cannot expel or suspend the student for more than 10 days for their behavior. And 5, what are my options? If I disagree with the outcome of the MDR, you can challenge a manifestation determination decision through a due process complaint. They also have what's called an expedited due process complaint for a manifestation determination. We have information on that too on our website. So why do students, many times students exhibit these behaviors and they're a manifestation of the disability. All children with disabilities are entitled to a free and appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So instead of suspending the child, they should look into what is triggering the behaviors. There may be a student who, for some reason, needs a break and instead exhibits behaviors. These services are in place for the school to provide the student. So they should be looking at, does the student need the student is getting frustrated. Instead, again, they should look at, maybe the student needs breaks. Maybe they need to, I don't know, take a walk. These are supports and services that the school district can provide. Another example is a student may get frustrated because he's having difficulty with speech and he can't communicate, and as a result, he has behaviors. What they should be looking at is, okay, what is triggering the behavior? What service can we implement? What service can we provide? But also keep in mind that typically when students have mental health issues, they can implement reasonable accommodations as well. And a reasonable accommodation should and could be provided to a student, for example, additional time for completing assignments or just taking a break, taking a walk. There's different types of reasonable accommodations that can be provided. Here we have some samples of services that the school district can provide. There's counseling, parent counseling and training, social work services, one-on-one or small group academic support. I have heard I have talked to parents that have requested a one-to-one aid when the student is in general ed. Many times they're told no, that they have to be in a special day class. That's not true. The law is clear. It says free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And they have to look at what supports and services are needed for the student to remain in the least restrictive environment. And they have to utilize those resources before they can consider placing the student in a more restrictive environment. In addition, there's transportation, speech and language services, school health services, physical and occupational therapy, supports and strategies for disability-related behaviors. They can implement strategies. If the student is receiving some type of a therapy or ABA at home, there may be some strategies that the school can implement that are working at home. And these are just ideas. Many times the school districts do not want to implement suggested strategies. For what reason, I don't know, but I think it's a matter of working with the school district. And if you have tips, techniques, strategies that you would like the school district to consider and implement, I would say address that at an IEP meeting. So educationally related mental health services, also known as ERMHS. What is ERMHS? It's an assessment for children with or suspected mental health disabilities. The assessment helps determine how a mental health disability interferes with a student's education. This is not to make a diagnosis, but finding the supports necessary and the accommodations to help the student benefit from his or her or their education. The local educational agency, also known as LEA, has the obligation to coordinate mental health services with outside organizations and or county mental health for any additional supports available. Under IDEA, the local education agency must consider outside evaluations and information, so consider asking your child's medical professional for input. Again, it's really important to talk to the doctor, talk to their therapist if they have a therapist, a counselor. They may have some suggestions on what works for the student. We do have a link here to Behavior and Discipline Toolkit. It's on our website. There's different publications on here. I would recommend that you visit our website. Go and you can look under special education. We have items by topic, subject matter, by subject, and it's special education. We have a discipline toolkit, extended school year toolkit. So there are different toolkits, and under those toolkits, we have publications that may be very helpful. So when can my child get psychological counseling or other mental health services? Psychological counseling and other mental health services may be available when your child's emotional status has a negative impact on their educational performance, and are required for the child to benefit from special education. Other mental health services, such as residential placement, can Again, it depends on the individual student's needs. But you know, the ERMHS, the educationally related mental health services, is it's also looked at as a related service. Um, it's like any other related services, like occupational therapy, speech therapy. You can request an ERMHS assessment for the school district to complete the evaluation to see if any additional services, either within the school district or an outside organization or county mental health, can get involved to provide services. So there's also what's called the functional behavior assessment, also known as an FBA, and the behavior intervention plans. An FBA is an assessment to understand what the behavior is and why it is occurring. A BIP is a formal written plan that identifies how to effectively prevent and respond to the behavior, including environmental changes, skill building, and strategies for the student and staff. Protocols for staff that staff must follow to effectively prevent and respond to the behavior. It's also to identify what is happening with the student, what is triggering the behaviors. So they look at, they basically observe the student, and it has to be somebody who's qualified to observe the student, to try to identify the triggers in terms of why the student is exhibiting the behaviors. So a functional behavior assessment, you can request, again, on any assessment, you can request an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, in writing. Again, the school district has 15 days to provide you an assessment plan under special education law. Once they provide you the plan and you sign the plan, the district has 60 days to complete the assessment after receiving your consent to assess. You can ask them for an interim behavior plan during testing period. I have had conversations with parents that when their child is facing suspension due to behavior, parent has asked for a 1-to-1 aid, the school says no, that they first have to complete the functional behavior assessment. I apologize for that. But if the student is having behaviors, you can ask for the functional behavior assessment. And I always say put it in writing. And you also want to put in writing that you're requesting a temporary behavior support plan while they do the functional behavior assessment. After the assessment is complete, you have a meeting to discuss the results of the assessment. And again, if you disagree with the assessment, you have the right to request an independent assessment. It's always good to, again, to review the assessment prior to having the IEP meeting. And also, if English isn't your first language, you have the right to request the assessment in your primary language. A behavior intervention plan, it's known as a BIP or a behavior support plan. A BIP is a plan that is unique to your child. It is designed to help identify, correct, and replace inappropriate behaviors. The plan should be based on the functional behavior assessment results and recommendations. If appropriate, you can include the child in the process. If student has an IEP or a 504 plan, it should be part of that plan. The behavior intervention plan goals should match behavioral goals in the IEP or 504 plan. Many times what they do is they create the behavior support plan. I have seen behavior support plans as part of the IEP, but I have also seen documents that are specific 2 behavior support plans, and they're identified as behavior support plans. So just so you know, sometimes they include them in the IEP itself, or they have their specific documents that identify the behavior support plan. But it should be a positive intervention plan. There shouldn't be anything negative. They shouldn't write, for example, Peter is going to get punished if he does X, Y, and Z. No, it should be a positive intervention plan. It could be, maybe they need redirection. Maybe they need to take a break. Maybe there should be a reward system in place. Give him a high five when he does good. There's different ways of implementing a behavior support plan. It just has to be a positive behavior support plan. Medical information, you want to make sure that if the student is exhibiting behaviors, if for some reason he or she is having a difficult time getting to school, you want to engage your child's doctor. And if they're absent because they're ill, you definitely want to get medical excuses. If you have medical appointments, or again, if the student is ill, or maybe it's due to chronic illness, you want to get that documentation from their doctor, especially if the student has difficulty getting to school or is arriving to school late. One of the other things that I did want to mention is reasonable accommodations are really important. And I will say, I have spoken to many parents who have students who have difficulty many times in the morning getting to school. That can be a reasonable accommodation as well. If the student, for some reason, if maybe they're, I don't know, having difficulty sleeping at night, taking medication, a reasonable accommodation could be arriving to school late. You just have to make sure that you have that conversation with your doctor, and the doctor is supportive, or their psychologist, if they're seeing a counselor, psychologist, make sure they're supportive, and they can provide you the written notes as well. So it's really important to involve their doctor. So here the final takeaways are: document everything. I think it's really important that if your child is having difficulty at school, if you receive calls, you want to follow up with either an email or a letter in writing. Many times they don't want certain things documented. You want to follow up with a call. Thank you for the call I received yesterday. We spoke about A, B, and C. If something in this email or letter is incorrect, please let me know. I have spoken to many, many parents who have requested certain things, and the school will not respond in writing. They will call the parent and they tell them, we do not provide the service. Again, it's always good to put it in writing. And if you receive a call, you can record it by responding in writing. And just note the conversation that you had, and ask if anything on this email or letter is incorrect. Please let me know. If it affects your child's learning, it's an IEP issue. You have the right to call an IEP meeting at any time. I think it's important to start there. There are times when you can agree to an IEP. There may be some things that you disagree with. You can partially sign. If you agree to something, say you agree to placement, but you don't agree to a certain service, you can document that on the IEP. So whenever there are issues that are concerning, it's really important to discuss them at the IEP meeting. You also have, again, the right to record the meeting. So we have come to the end.